we really are so grateful that we have members like Congressman Polis and Eshoo and the others you've heard from who really do get it. But it is a little misrepresenting the reality, I'm afraid, of the Hill. But we do want to and really value the wisdom and judgment and great and honor, frankly, the tremendous effort that has gone on in defense of important issues to the industry. Anna Eshoo has been a leader for so many years. It's just tremendous. She represents, obviously, a key part of Silicon Valley. She's on a very important Energy and Commerce Committee, is a co-chair of the Congressional Internet Caucus, has been a leader on issues from spam to spectrum, innovation agenda. She's always there. People in the industry understand how valuable she is as a common sense yet very strong voice for issues that are critical to making our economy grow and our industry prosper. So, Anna, thank you once again for being with us.
Well, good morning, everyone. How are you? Good. I can't believe that a year has gone by. It really is a year since this coming together. Honestly, I was just stunned when I was contemplating that. It's wonderful to be here with you. I appreciate the invitation. I especially, obviously, respect and appreciate the work that you do, and led by Ed Black, who is I think that when I think of Ed, there are no grays with Ed. He knows what needs to be pursued in terms of, on behalf of the organization, and I don't think anyone knows these issues better. He certainly understands the Hill and all of its vagaries, and yet out of all of that, the agenda of CCIA is always pressed forward, and it's a very important one, obviously for the stakeholders. But this is the power center of our country. Obviously, it's the power center of the world in Washington, D.C. And so what these issues represent are enormous. They are for the betterment and the advancement of the country. It represents a growing and most important part of our national economy, a very, very important sector, the employment of Americans, and that the United States of America continue to be the flagship relative to innovation and what we export to the rest of the world. So this isn't just CCIA's annual Washington Caucus meeting. This represents a lot. Let me just give you, and I'm sure other members, other guests that were here this morning, I hope I'm not terribly repetitious, but I thought that I'd go through what we've dealt with over the last year, snapshot of everything, and a few comments, and then open it up for questions. I think the first, in terms of my time and energy having been spent on spectrum reform, represents a real victory. We got that done. They're never easy. These things are never easy to get done. But I think that working with Greg Walden, number one, is really enjoyable. We have a genuine respect for each other. And we worked hard. We worked very hard together to bring forward a bill that would enjoy a broad bipartisan support. Having said that, there are always different parts of a bill where, for one reason or another, you don't have agreement. But then at the end, we did. As we did, we came together around the D block. But I think that it does signify a victory because there were many things that were in the bill that are worth celebrating. First of all, the whole issue of spectrum and a nationwide interoperable public safety network for for law enforcement, for fire, EMS, all of our public safety people. That was the one recommendation of our nation's 9/11 Commission that had not been implemented. And it took almost a decade to do it. And so that's why I think that this is a significant. Imagine, and I've thought so many times, my mind goes back to that day. We all remember where we were when the nation was attacked. And the idea that all of these people that work to save people's lives, showing up at the Twin Towers, going into those dark buildings, and they couldn't communicate with each other. So to say that we have set up something that is going to address that, I think is very, very important for the American people. You know that I've been on E911, Next Gen 911 for a long time, And this is the first time that, that we have really secured some dollars for our call centers across the country so that we can help bring them into the 21st century. And I think that that is a wonderful accomplishment. Do I wish there were more dollars? Of course I do. But this is a down payment for the future. And I think that when enabling first responders to receive photos and video and text messages is really going to improve the quality of the services that they bring forward. I fought very, very hard for unlicensed spectrum. And it was amazing to me how few members of the entire subcommittee and the full committee didn't even understand this. They really didn't understand what unlicensed spectrum was. And they wanted to auction it off and whatever. Meanwhile, I'm at home on the weekends, walking around even downtown Palo Alto into the smallest startups, 7 people, 5 people, 11 people. And the consistent question I asked was, what is it that would cause you to shut off the lights, close the door, lock it, and have to walk away? And they said, if we lose unlicensed spectrum. So I kept bringing that message back to my colleagues, and we won that. And I think that's a very important victory because it really is the platform for innovation. And so many of the innovative technologies that have been launched as a result of unlicensed are really taken for granted in the country. But it is the platform, I think, that is going to launch more. There's a big price tag to it. I mean, it's been estimated anywhere between 40 to 60 some billion dollars a year. That's jobs. And we can't overlook even one job, much less what this represents. So I'm really proud of that. Of what we were able to do. And then, of course, the incentive auction authority, where we repurpose spectrum. I don't need to walk through this with you. If anyone knows this, you do. You know it backward and forward. I think the one thing that I would say about this effort is that I know, I've been around long enough now to know that Congress doesn't visit or revisit spectrum and the repurposing of spectrum very often. At best, we go at it once a decade. So I do think that this once a decade plus, we produced something that was worthy of the moment and I think did a good job on it. I'm pleased with it. There were some days and weeks where I thought, damn, when are we going to get this thing done? I mean, I thought, we can just do it like this. But, I always say there are 2 clocks on the wall. One is regular time, the other is government time. And so you have to bring people along. And it was worth the time and the effort. SOPA, postponed indefinitely. What does this whole thing say? I think when you stand back, there are several things that can be, several observations that I have drawn from what I observed and kind of being in the middle of it as well. And that is that I think it really represents a fundamental shift in how Congress views the technology community. That would be number one. And I also, number two, would say that because of technology, there are many, 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 many that are watching the Congress. This is not about AstroTurf. This is about individuals coming together and saying so, and how powerful that is. It always has been, and it always will be. But it's a question of whether people are going to weigh in or not. And I know that large companies have taken credit for it, small companies. Look, whomever was involved in it, kudos to you, because it was an overly broad bill, and I'm not going to go into the details of it. It's already been hashed and rehashed. But I think the power of the voices of people, that being unleashed, and how the Congress views the technology committee, I think, or community, are really lessons to be drawn from it. Now, we are still left with a problem. This has not been resolved. I mean, this thing was killed. No question about it. But the hijacking of American genius is something that has to be taken very seriously. And it's why I support the Open Act. I think it's important to do that. Do I think anything's going to come up this year? No. When Congress feels burned, they stay away from the stove, i.e. healthcare. The Clintons brought it up in the beginning of his first administration, and look how long it took to go back to it, and there's a lot of history to that. Net neutrality rules went into effect. Last year we were faced with, and I spoke about it when I was here, we were faced with defending the FCC's open internet rules at my subcommittee and in the Rules Committee and on the floor of the House. You know that I take that whole subject matter seriously. I'm not going to do a deep dive. You already know my record. You know the efforts and all of that. But I do think that we always have to remain vigilant, and there are many different fronts where we have to. Now, the rules went into effect last November, but again, as I said, we have to remain vigilant for attempts to circumvent the FCC's open internet rules. Now, last month, the press report suggested that a new service offered by one of the nation's largest communications companies does raise net neutrality concerns, and I think that there needs to be a closer examination of the issue and whether the use of data caps are being applied equally to all network applications. We had a bill on FCC process reform. I didn't think it was much of a bill. It wasn't thoughtfully drawn, in my view. I think it's very important to look for every opportunity to do substantive and important reforms, no matter where we are in the government. I mean, we have collected a lot of dust and cobwebs over things, and I think that we have to constantly call for a fresh and new way to approach things. In my view, the bill really fell short, and I'm not using anything as an excuse. It just was not well drawn. If anyone heard Mr. Dingell, who was around, I think, when some of these things were first drawn up, I mean, he knows it very well, and he kept pointing out to the majority, don't do it this way, this is the way we should do it. At any rate, I never thought it was such a great bill, but I did use the opportunity to offer an amendment at the committee markup and on the House floor on, because of the jurisdiction, that there be a requirement of political advertisers to disclose contributors of $10,000 or more as a condition of purchasing time and for purchasing ad time. Now, I also advocated for opening up the political files that rest in the probably the basements and wooden file cabinets, not even metal file cabinets, because this has gone on for a long, long time. We're living in a new era, where people want to know. And when they do know, they'll make their decision. Look at what happened with SOPA. And I am going to draw a nexus because it's still part of this this broad, canvas of the American people being engaged in what's going on. The idea of what's happening with super PACs, where we have secret money and secret donors and secret amounts and secret everything, is the antithesis to a democracy. So while this may seem like it's just pulling one thread, yes it is, but I think it's an important one. And I think that these things should be posted on the internet. Why should they just sit in some file somewhere? And the idea that broadcasters say this is going to cost money is laughable. Laughable. Anyone think here that broadcasters are not going to do well in this political season with political advertising? So I think it's really important. I have my needle stuck on this, and you're going to see whatever opportunities there are with the committee that I'm on and its jurisdictions, as well as other areas, to really press hard for disclosure. Disclosure is important in a democracy, and I think it's offensive when it goes the other way. It's more than offensive. I think it strikes at the heart of democracy. I talked about the passage of that bill and the incentive auctions. I think the price on the incentive auctions is lowballed, which is fine with me. It's a conservative number, but it shows how extraordinarily valuable it is. And as I've said to my constituents, because most people they don't talk the way we do here about spectrum. You talk about radio waves, they understand it. And that is that this is something that you can't go to Macy's or Nordstrom or Neiman Marcus to buy. This is something that rests in the hands of the Congress. And now the chairman of the subcommittee and myself are launching a working task force, whatever it's called, to examine government-held spectrum. And I don't know the last time that was really examined, but I think it needs to be because this is valuable. Is there spectrum that's not being used? Is it being used for its highest and best purpose? I don't think we really know the answers to those questions. And so I look forward to, being a part of that. And I love to see other members of the subcommittee being engaged, and so I asked other members to be a part of this as well, and so we're launching that. I still have some hope that this, what I call my dig once policy, I think this is one of the most common sense things I've ever come up with, and that is that that as we build federal roads, why do we go back and tear them up afterward when there's such a need for broadband expansion in the country? Why not make sure that when something is being built, not rebuilt, but built the first time around, that what needs to be put into the ground is done then? So I've asked the GAO to examine the benefits of the policy, and we expect to see a report by midsummer. There is important interest in this effort in the Senate. There is in the House. I'm going to keep pressing on it because, again, I don't think we're going to be able to brag about the United States of America until, in the broadband area, until we're number one in the world. And I've said it every time I've come here, that's my goal. And we should not settle for anything less. And I'm not proud of the numbers of what they are, whether we're 17th or 27th or 24th or 16th, whatever the heck those numbers are. You know what? It's not number one. So we still have work to do. And that's why I keep trying to chip away in each area so that when it's all stitched together and the ratings come up in the future, that the United States of America is number one. I think that, I'm kind of left disappointed with where the testing has left us in this whole light squared thing. And I don't think it should stop us from thinking about new and creative ways to drive competition and to expand wireless broadband deployment across the country. So when I talk about the Dig Once policy, it really is part of that larger picture. We've got 70 or less legislative days left to the 112th Congress. Wonder what historians are going to write about this Congress. If they asked me, I have some paragraphs that I would submit to them for consideration. But let me just say that I think that that being the ranking member of the subcommittee has been exciting. I love it. I enjoy it. And it's an opportunity. It notches you up to a place where you're consulted. You're not always paid full attention to. But that's not the way the Congress works anyway. But to be able to lean in on so many of these policies, hold out for some of the larger things that I thought were real musts for the country, and then working and reshaping things so that we could come up with something that held compromise and consensus and held people together so that we could move something forward, get something done for the country. This has not been newspaper headlines above the fold. I never expected it to be. But I said to you from the beginning, we have a responsibility to produce something for the country, and I think that we did. I know many of you are interested in Verizon's proposed spectrum transaction, with several cable companies as well as the related marketing agreements. Earlier today, the ranking member Waxman and I sent a letter to Chairman Upton and Subcommittee Chairman Walden requesting a hearing on the matter. We said we have not taken a position either way, but we do believe that that this deserves a hearing and an examination. That's the serious work that Congress needs to always undertake, and we've called for that. So I believe that I work in a niche, not only in the Congress, but in the country that represents some of the most exciting of times. We're constantly struggling to and working, to adjust things, to make things right. I think the whole issue of how competition is defined still looms very large over all of us. I have an old-fashioned, maybe it's an old-fashioned, but I've been around for a while, right? My kids say, Mom, unless you expect to live to be 110 years old, you're past middle age. How do you like that when your kids tell you that? Yeah. And I announced to them at one of their birthdays this year that it was official. They were now officially older than I am. But this is an exciting sector to be a part of and to help shape good policies in. And you can tell by the fullness of my voice, the smile on my face, and the eagerness and the earnestness that I say that with, that I couldn't mean it more. And of course, representing the congressional district that I am so privileged to represent, this is part of the backbone of it. This is, it's the innovation hub of our nation, and really represents something very, very important to people, countries, individuals, lovers of democracy around the world. And so I think that that's just a great combination. I think I may have skipped over some things, but I may have talked long enough at you. So how about the questions that you have, and I'll do the best I can to address them. And again, I want to thank not only the event sponsors, Data Foundry, Intuit, and Google, but to all of the members of CCIA. You're a very, very important organization, and you're respected on the Hill. No one can say when you speak that you don't know what you're talking about. And the respect that members have for you on both sides of the aisle, you continue to build that respect, and in no small measure to Ed Black, who leads the organization, but the member companies leaning in and doing more than their fair share is absolutely essential. And you know that this work is ongoing. We're never finished. Sorry to tell you that. You know, we feel relieved when we get one thing under our wing, and then along comes something major. But thank you for the partnership. I love working with you, and thank you for what you do, because this is, at the end of the day, this is not just about an organization or a company. It's about our country. It's about our country. And God knows the American people want to see people working together to promote and make the investments that are really going to pay off for our country. So with that, be happy to take some questions. Way in the back. Hi. Yes. Well, let me just, you've read the bill. I have a bad habit. I read things before I express any kind of judgment. I know that it was introduced. That's all I know. I've been out since 7:30 this morning speaking and meeting, so I'm not going to comment on the bill because I can't. I just don't know what the thrust of the bill is, and but I think it's terrific that they are working together and examining what I raised, and that is the whole issue of how much spectrum the federal government is holding, what's being used, is there a higher and better purpose, can there be swapping? All of those things need to be addressed, and to the extent that the bill is a part of that, I welcome it. Yes.
Go ahead.
I don't think there's any truth to the rumor that CCIA is going to be the Cloud Computing Industry Association next year, but it very well could be, thanks in large part to efforts from people in your district. But now where the cloud resides in data centers, there seems to be some concern amongst the environmental community that data centers use so much power, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm wondering if you are able to use the digital scales of justice to help indicate what the balance is these days between power use and the efficiencies that the cloud is bringing everybody.
Well, I think it's an area of that holds a great deal of promise. Number one, I mean, all I have to do is look at my district that has come up with the technology for cloud computing, the effect that that has had, but then look across to other parts of my congressional district that are responsible for having launched environmental technologies that really capture so much in terms of the savings and bring about very, very high efficiencies when it comes to energy. So these elements need to be married. And I think it, again, I mean, it strikes me as before I scratch my head and say, now we've got a big problem and what is it that we're going to do? The first thing that is coming from me is, this is opportunity incorporated. So now, I mean, the more that cloud computing is utilized, the issue that you just raised is raised. But I have confidence that that if, in fact, there is a shortage in terms of addressing it's almost becoming an insatiable appetite for cloud computing, that we can match that with efficiencies relative to energy. I really don't have any doubt in this area, honestly, and I think it's exciting. Now, what's very important in this, and I think if I might use an analogy, we have the cyber bill coming up tomorrow, is that the communities of interest, the stakeholders, really have to sit down and talk to each other. They really have to talk to each other. And I'm not talking about the kind of talk that goes on in a Washington meeting where people get in a room and they blah, 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 and nothing comes out of it. I call that a Washington meeting. There isn't any result from the meeting, but people will say we talked. Well, what was accomplished? So the stakeholders have to be, first of all, committed to being partners in it, and then proceed. So I think that I think this holds enormous promise, and I don't think it's a problem that we can't overcome at all. I think we have the wherewithal. I think the tools are there. I think the technologies are there, and I think we can be an example for the rest of the world, to tell you the truth. Yes.
Hi,
How are you, Bernie?
this
Great
morning?
to see you.
It's good to see you. Thank you, as always, for coming and spending time with us.
Sure.
like
No,
this.
I
It's important,
look forward to it.
and we really appreciate it. And thanks for what you do as Silicon Valley constituents. We really appreciate all that you do, really do. To pick up on something you were just saying about the way this industry and as a result our country leads the world in technology, in innovation, you don't see companies like your constituents cropping up out of nothing and starting up in Europe. The climate for innovation, the regulatory climate, the opportunity to do this, it's just different. It's not the same. Mm-hmm. And so as you look down the road at how we continue to be the innovative leaders, the economic growth leaders, the jobs of the 21st century, one of the things that we're talking about today, and Danny Weitzner from the White House is going to be following you, and as you know, there's in the speaking program today, and as you know, the administration's involved in driving this multi-stakeholder look at data and privacy and policy, and at least partly in response so that the U.S. is saying something while the European Commission is driving forward with this rather different view of data, of future innovation, of privacy policy, and so on. There's really potential here that the economic leadership and growth that your district has thrived in, and through that helped the whole country with, could change in the future instead of continuing to expand globally and be robust. So both the multi-stakeholder process the administration is going to be driving forward, the importance of that, and the U.S. response and engagement with Europe on these kind of draconian principles that,
Right.
that this different view that they have. What are your thoughts? it could be one of the biggest issues for both economic policy, trade policy, and other things going forward.
Well, one of the things that worries me the most about this almost political calcification, where we're just kind of frozen in a place and not in the big picture moving and getting things done for the country. There have always been battles and fights in the Congress. That's it. It's our democracy. We debate these things out. We go to the mat with our ideas. But then at the end of the day, the week, the month, the year, you come up with something and you move the country forward because there's an understanding that we have an obligation to do that. And we stand on the shoulders of previous generations that have done that as well. And we cannot for a moment be so gladdened by bright spots, my district, Silicon Valley, innovation, great technologies, on the move, new companies being born. You can never, ever, ever take that for granted. You have to keep investing. You have to keep the ingredients going that allows for that to happen. Google is here. I disagreed with Google. I can't remember what the policy was. And, the press was so interested. Why would you disagree with your constituent company? I said, because to tell you the truth, if the policy that they're for now were in place 11 years ago, they would have never been born. I want new companies to be born. So, this is all, it's professional. None of it is personal. So, but I think that we are in a place right now where there are at least some that think, because we're the United States of America, that it's just going to continue to happen. And it's not. Because while we've been fighting wars and misspending money, in my view, there are other countries that have been investing in the right stuff. You've all probably have read Tom Friedman's book, and he talks about the 5 pillars. I've been talking about these 5 pillars since I first was elected to Congress, and what you have to keep investing in. And when you do, the United States of America goes like this. And when you don't, we move down. And it's not in any necessary order, but it's infrastructure, and all that means, it's immigration, it's capital formation, it's research and development, and it's education. So, these are the things that companies and their leaders and their employees talk to me about. It's what my constituents that aren't even employed in this industry talk to me about. So, the Congress is, I think that we're at a real fork in the road. And we're either going to have to make up our minds that tax policy is important in all of this. There's no doubt about it. But we've got to put the pedal to the metal and make sure that we're preparing for the next decade and seeding what we want to be sown, so that the right stuff is reaped, and that at the end of this century, I won't be around, but hopefully historians will write that the 21st century was an American century and not where America declined. It's as big as that, it's as important as that, and we cannot take it for granted. Now, the business I'm in is the business of incrementalism. You move at a snail's pace. It took all last year and a couple of months this year to get the spectrum bill done. But what I kept my eye on was not just what I needed to do today and what I wanted to do tomorrow and see what strategies I could develop for the following week and the following month, but my penultimate goal was that we get this done for the country and that we update this spectrum policy so that it's a 21st century policy. So we're going to be, we are on a slippery slope if, in fact, we're taking all this for granted. There's nothing written anywhere that the United States of America will be the greatest, most powerful, most respected, most progressive nation in the world if we don't invest in it, period. And it's what I worry the most about. And really what drives me in these issues, because all of the things that we're involved in here together are real drivers of that economy and the future. And as we have learned, are tools for democracy and democratization, which is, I think, one of the proudest outcomes for all of us. So maybe I should end on that note.
Well,
Ed?
let me-
You have a question?
Just one,
boss is gonna
maybe a
ask the
message,
question.
just an ending message, because it touches on some of the things you talked about, but may not yet be on your radar scope in a big way. But it's Spectrum and your committee, you deal, the ITU, International Telecommunications
Right.
Union, is important out there, and has been, and I'm happy to raise an issue where a huge part of industry is united, where we are not saying the executive branch is doing the wrong thing, they're doing the right thing. But we do have problems around the world, and that the truth is there will be efforts in the ITU context about internet governance that poses real threat.
Right.
And a broad spectrum of industry and the government and the executive branch are working very well. I guess my question is, to the extent that you have cross-legislative communications, et cetera, to help be a voice letting people know, don't let the ITU, I mean, this is the goose that laid the golden egg.
Right.
Don't mess around with the diet. And I know you know that, and I just, a lot of us, I think, see that as a fairly immediate agenda item that hasn't gotten wide attention. I know you must be aware of it, but just pass that on and say thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you.